MASA TV, Entrepreneurship. My name is Belinda and I'll be your host for the night. In recent years, the concept of entrepreneurship has become almost like a buzzword, creating great confusion amongst the business community as well as students. So in today's episode, I'll be delving into what exactly is entrepreneurship and outline the steps you can take as a student to begin your own entrepreneurial journey. We'll then be joined by an entrepreneur who will walk us through the process of how she identified the need for health education in rural communities and the steps she took to make this far-reaching impact. And for the final segment, a representative from Grant Thornton and the Accelerator will share the unique perspective on student entrepreneurship and provide some tips and tricks on how all students can harness these skills to increase their employability. So without further ado, let's get started with our first segment. What is entrepreneurship? Now, entrepreneurship is generally known as the process of starting your own business and then expanding it. Perhaps you want to set up an online store or create an app. These are all forms of businesses, but entrepreneurship actually takes the concept a step further. An entrepreneur is someone who identifies a problem and then finds a solution to that problem. For example, in the case of Airbnb, the founders believed that hotels left patrons disconnected from the city and its culture, and so they created a service to bring people across all borders together within the same home. As a student, I know the feeling of wanting to make a tangible change in my community, but not knowing how or where to start. So my advice to you is to firstly, identify a problem that you're willing to solve, conduct your research, seek guidance, and then expand your network. You can leverage your connections in order to learn more about how they started out and what tips they may have to offer you as well. From here, you could also attend networking events and potentially casually pitch your ideas to industry professionals and just ask for their thoughts. It is really about how proactive you are in seeking out connections and your open-mindedness to learn and embrace any new opportunities that may come your way. While it may feel so scary to commit to a new idea and really believe in yourself, it is truly an impressive feat that not a lot of students can say they've achieved. However, in saying all this, you need to expect hard work, as you will need to be resilient, prepared to fail, and open to critical feedback. As always though, just use this as an opportunity to stop, reflect on your idea, and as momentum for your professional and personal growth. However, putting our passions aside, I know a prime concern that we as all students share is how we're going to finance these side hustles. Studying at university barely leaves any time to work, so the issue of funding is often a deciding factor in the feasibility of our ventures. What a lot of students don't know is that fortunately, there are many resources out there to help get you started. What I would recommend for you to do once you've assessed the type of funding you need and how much of it you need is to apply to as many grant programs as possible. There are many local council grants available, as well as small business grants and social enterprise grants, all which can be found on the Business Victoria website. Furthermore, you could also look into just setting up a separate savings account and allocating a certain amount of your income into that account weekly. Budgeting is a really important skill to have to ensure that you have a complete picture of all the expenses you'll be investing into your startup. If this all seems overwhelming to you at the moment, don't stress. Our first guest speaker, Eliza Lee, will be running us through her entrepreneurial journey, where you'll not only see how her initial idea was conceived, but also her business plan in the form of a pitch deck. And with that, I'd love to give a warm welcome to Eliza, a young entrepreneur and the co-founder of Accelerator to Health, a community health education mission designed to close the gap in global health inequality.
Hey guys, welcome back to MASA's channel. I can't believe they have literally trusted me to film this by myself. So if this is the dodgiest segment of the whole episode, I'm really sorry in advance. But if you have not met me yet, my name is Eliza and I am the Managing Director and one of the co-founders here at Accelerator to Health, which is a charity that I started with a few friends during my last year of studying Biomed Com at Monash University last year, and is a charity where we provide free health education to some of the most disadvantaged communities in rural Philippines. And if you want to check us out, we're at acceleratorhealth.org. But today, MASA, thank you so much for having me, and they've sent me through a bunch of questions about entrepreneurship, about getting started, about tips and advice for students. So if that's your jam, keep watching on. Alright, story time. So question 1 says, what was your motivation for wanting to start a business, and how did your business idea come about? So that is a great question. So I think by the end of high school, I definitely knew 2 things for certain. 1, I definitely wanted to be in the health space somehow. And secondly, that I definitely wanted to be some sort of social entrepreneur and do business for good and be able to give back that way, because I think that's the most sustainable way of being able to be generous. And I was definitely inspired by business models like thank you water was a big thing back then. So I went into university studying biomed and commerce, obviously to have the mix of both. And during that first year, that summer break, I went over to the Philippines on a volunteering trip as a medical aid student. And essentially for that whole summer, I followed around doctors in the community who were part of a foundation. So it's like a charity over there. And they went out to some of the most far-flung areas to be able to give free surgeries, which were absolutely life-changing for their Indigenous population. And I was so sort of touched by that experience that I said, definitely I'll come back here one day and do more. And just think, when I was, an 18-year-old kid, had no idea what do more meant. So I asked the doctors around me and I said, what possibly could, young students like myself who haven't really gone through university yet do to make a difference and help here? And turns out what he said was that students can actually do a lot, because physicians, people who are practicing medicine or whatnot are able to deliver free services, but what he said was that these free services really should not be, they should be the last line and they should be the last option, when really to be able to create real systemic change should be health education. Providing health education early enough should be the first line. And then I took that on and thought, this is really what some of these diseases that are occurring here, what we study in university anyway. Maybe one day I could come back, take some friends who are studying a similar degree to what I was, to come and teach and fill that void. Because, unfortunately, in the world right now, even though it feels like we are solving the problem, still half the world lacks access to basic health services. And I think that's definitely so evident now that the pandemic has happened, and we can see that so more clearly. But in countries like the Philippines, where 1 in 5 households still lives in poverty, you can imagine in rural communities how hard that is to be able to access a doctor, let alone someone to be able to teach you about preventing diseases. And so that's exactly where we're at here now, 4 years on. How to Health does exactly that. We go into local schools and local health facilities where Indigenous populations might come, because those health services are free, and actually teach about some of the most important health topics, in particular for the youth of our partner communities. That is things like mental health, especially during this time, which they would otherwise not be taught on. And that is incredible for us to say that we've been able to make it happen in literally the last 2 years. And all the health education that occurs in the Philippines is fully funded by our Australian arm, because we essentially have a social enterprise model where we run education services here, which are a GAMSAT exam service and med interview services to help students get into postgraduate medicine. And so the proceeds from those tuition fees go straight towards making our health education missions in the Philippines happen. So the second question is, what steps did you take after your pitch, business plan, or idea to make it a reality? That is a great question. It feels like yonks ago, actually. So I actually came through quite a few different entrepreneurial programs like accelerators. I did the Generator Accelerator program and a few others. And they were more geared towards sort of companies that were very tech driven or for the future of whatnot, and not quite in the international development space, which is what How to Health does. And in those programs, you definitely learn the Facebook Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things, which is completely different for sort of the international development space, where you are definitely working with and you're meant to serve vulnerable people. And so you can't really do that. So what happened for us to be able to make it happen was we took year 1 really slowly, and now in year 2 we're able to move a lot faster. So year 1 and day one of year one for us looked like I went back to the Philippines and asked a few friends to come with me to be able to not do the health education idea, but to really validate that it was a need in a particular partner community that we were going into. And I'm so thankful for my co-founder in the Philippines, who was the one who set that whole relationship up, so that wasn't a barrier for us over here in Australia. And so I took a group of 4 of my friends who were studying biomed over, and we spent about 2 weeks in that community just trying to get as many meetings as possible to meet people. And from the vice mayor to medical directors of local hospitals to people who are on the front lines being nurses to teachers at schools, and really asking them what the health context was on ground and sort of what they needed help with. And by the end of that, we could jot down specifically what diseases they wanted to tackle, how they would talk about those diseases, and exactly where we would be able to teach if we were to come back and do this again. And after that first 2-week trip at the start of last year, we took a video of the whole experience and basically made a video out of it and popped it onto Facebook. And just myself and my 4 friends, we just shared it on Facebook and said, if we were to do this again in our next semester break, which was midway last year, would anyone want to come on this trip with us and sort of start making a difference and piloting this health education process? And within sort of 2 weeks, we had over 100 students apply to this program that we had just sort of set up out of our brains, and that was so incredible to see. So we were able to recruit students, and we went over midway last year to do our first ever health education trip. And so we piloted it by going into different local school classrooms and going into high schools as well as elementary schools and doing our first lessons on those topics. And we had a really good run, but to be honest, they weren't great yet. They were still, our version of an MVP. We were still iterating on how we could make it more engaging and more relevant to the audience. And then, I guess what we learned from that experience is that here in Australia, we get taught in a very lecture style that professors know best and whatnot. But to really engage the youth over in the Philippines, their culture is all about arts and creativity and music. And so now we embed so much of that in our lessons to be able to make messages that are, really important, actually stick around because it's embedded in something that's relevant to something that's fun and creative. But yeah, we kept doing that until even the start of this year. We were running our mission trips every 6 months, and we got to a point where we were getting into more schools. The Department of Education over in the Philippines had approved our program to be an official program of theirs. And then we got so many more schools on board, and then obviously the pandemic hit, which meant for international travel in particular, that was not possible to be able to run our mission trips anymore. But that was a great lesson for us because we now run our health education lessons online, which has opened us up to a whole new world of opportunity in terms of scaling to different schools and being able to be present for more students. But also, it's given us here now in year 2 of operating at Hallard to be able to stop and think about what sustainable funding does look like for us, which has meant that in year 2 of Hallard, we've definitely gotten the chance to focus on what sustainable funding looks like us for the future. And that's exactly what we've done. So like I mentioned, our whole business model is that we have an education service here in Australia where we run GAMSAT and med interview services. And the second that lockdowns happened, classes went online, uni went online, we went online too. And it was a really scary thing because we were about 1 month in to piloting these health education classes, which were generating our revenue for us. And we really had to choose 2 things, just like close up shop for the whole pandemic or go online. And I'm so grateful that we made the choice to go online. It was a massive jump. We had to do so much to be able to get online and be able to get students to take classes online. But what was, maybe 10 students sitting in a classroom on a Monash campus scaled to now we have, thousands of students that we've reached through our GAMSAT and MMI services who come onto our Zoom from literally across the world, which is insane to think about. And really cool to see that year 2 has planned out like that for us. Awesome. So question number 3. Which organizations or programs did you leverage to help you? I think this is a great question for me because I actually did so many different programs as a student, and I think as a university student, we have so much available at our fingertips now, and there's so many programs to be able to apply for. But I definitely think I was able to experience the cream of the crop through what I was able to go through. So programs-wise, whilst I was still in university, like I said, I went through the Generators Accelerator program. Actually, I did the Validator program first, then got into the Accelerator, which was absolutely terrific in terms of learning how to generate revenue and really start a business from the ground up. I also did the Y-Gap Accelerator program, which is geared towards migrant and refugee social entrepreneurs, and that gave me this whole new world of understanding how to design things for vulnerable communities with so much empathy and compassion, which was terrific, specifically, to gearing up towards starting Hallard. And then within university itself, I obviously did a Bachelor of Commerce, and within that degree, there is just so much that you're able to do at Monash Business School. In particular, there were 2 subjects which were mind-changing. The first one was called Entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley, and the second one was Business in Asia, which were both global experiences that definitely took my mind to realize that there's so much opportunity in the world and how different countries do different things. I know those 2 experiences might not be available now during this time, but definitely so worthwhile if it does come up as an opportunity in the future to take. And then outside of university and outside of these programs, I also went on to do a program called Pitch at Palace, which is run by, I think it's like the Duke of York's team or something. And you basically pitch your startup idea, and if you get picked as sort of one of the top ones from your state, you get to go on to sort of a national competition and see what other startups are doing across the country. And that was terrific in terms of really honing my pitching skills, as well as just meeting, people from across Australia and what they're doing. But what happens when you're so young and starting to get into all these programs is that everything has a pitching component to it. But really, I think the art of pitching is really knowing exactly what you want. And if you're going into all these programs and whatnot with the idea that it's Shark Tank, that you basically pitch for money and you don't even know what you're going to do with it afterwards, that's not the best use of time. And so at the end of the day, I very much learned that it's not necessarily funding, or it's not necessarily doing more pitches that actually gets you progress, but it's really making meaningful connections with people who can truly help you, get to a bigger vision and a bigger version of what you dream for the organization. So in particular, the organizations that I was able to connect with that really did make a difference in our journey in the early days was surprisingly like Rotary clubs from across the world. Because we had an international organization, there were Rotary clubs here in Melbourne that helped us out, and over in the Philippines as well. And having that connection to something that was stable but in both sort of countries really helped us out with logistics and all this other stuff, because they were an established organization when we weren't yet. Truly, the people who have made the most difference in our trajectory so far have been our pro bono partners who have stuck with us since day one. So our pro bono legal firm is Kingwood Mallisons over up in Sydney, and Ensight, who are our digital pro bono partners, and they do amazing stuff in the charity space, and I would definitely recommend you guys to check them out if that's something that you need. Question 4 is, how is Hallard to Hallard doing now? Awesome question. Well, Hallard, we're in year 2 of operating, but we're actually in year 1 of being an official registered charity. We are doing so much better than we ever expected. We hit 6 figures in our first year as a charity, which is incredible. And in the first 6 months of the pandemic, like I said, we took everything online, and that meant we were able to literally scale 10x in those first 6 months of the pandemic, which is insane. And in terms of our social impact side of things, we've been able to teach over 4,000 students in the Philippines in our first year, which is absolutely incredible. And since going online, have been able to reach so many more schools who are continuing to onboard with us, even right through the pandemic, which has been absolutely terrific to see everyone, the word really getting out that this is an available option for students and schools and health facilities as well. And that is such a testament to the team who have definitely, whilst being isolated and apart, coming together during this time. And I think that is truly my proudest achievement here at Hallard, is just seeing the team come together and make all those things happen. So the last question is, question 5, what are some final words of encouragement for aspiring entrepreneurs? If you have been through or you're going through a Generator program, you will definitely learn this. And this is the best piece of advice that I've received, regardless if you're going to want to be an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, run a charity, a business or whatnot. Really, for day one founders, there are only 2 things that you need to focus on and do. The first is just build something that someone absolutely loves, and not just likes, but they absolutely love, are obsessed with your product, service, and are going to tell someone else about it. The second is to then find someone else like the first person to love what you've built just as much. And that's it. Your problems down the line, your day 2 problems of thinking of how to grow this or whatnot, will come after you've figured out those 2 things on day 1. And for everyone who's watching this, who has probably taken some time out because you're really interested in this space or want to go on this journey yourself too, then, you know, the fact that you have invested this time in learning and probably doing some research now as well, the fact that you've taken that first step is already miles ahead of not starting at all. Thank you so much, MASA, for having me. That was surprisingly a lot of fun to film by myself. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Eliza, for sharing your story with us. It was really inspiring to hear the passion you have for what you do, and I'm sure our viewers took away some great insights. For our final segment of the night, we'll be joined by 2 industry professionals from Grant Thornton and the Generator. First up, we have Amy Jackson from Grant Thornton. Her main role is to accelerate the commercialization of businesses by accessing innovation incentives. She will share professional insights on student entrepreneurs and provide some tips and tricks for any aspiring entrepreneurs out there.
Hi MASA, my name is Amy Jackson and I'm a Senior Associate at Grant Thornton. I'm part of the Innovation Incentives team, which means I help businesses from top ASX listed companies to startups to leverage their intellectual assets. So this includes developing innovation strategies and accessing innovation incentives like the R&D tax incentive. Thank you so much for the opportunity to respond to your excellent questions today. The first question is how to take advantage of being a student entrepreneur and how to bring these skills into the workforce for the future. Being a student, and particularly being an entrepreneur while you're at university, really gives you so much access to professors, guest speakers, and it gives you an ID to get into events rather cheaply that might ordinarily cost a fortune. So I think there's an amazing network at your university to ask for advice and to take advantage of being an entrepreneur. Generally, people want to help you and people are really willing to give their time to provide you advice. But I would really encourage you to think of when you think of mentoring or asking for advice from people, that you think of it as a 2-way relationship. So have a think about what you can give to that relationship as much as what advice you might need from someone. So for example, if you can ask your university network to potentially give you some advice, maybe something that you could give back is publicity or PR or marketing for your university to showcase their entrepreneurship programs. I think that this is such a valuable skill that will carry you forward in the workplace, because when you start work, often while university prepares you well for the workplace, there is a whole lot more to learn, both technically in your area, but also about developing relationships with people and different organizational structures and cultures. And I really think having that ability to ask for help and not being afraid to ask and just being so enthusiastic to learn from people is incredibly important, no matter where your careers take you. The second question is, are student entrepreneurs more attractive in terms of employability? If so, how? I think student entrepreneurs are very attractive in terms of employability because of demonstrated initiative, drive, and curiosity. From my perspective, technical skills can always be taught, whereas work ethic, enthusiasm, and the willingness to learn is much, much harder to teach. And I think it's safe to say that student entrepreneurs demonstrate high levels of resilience, project management skills, problem-solving skills, and adaptability, all the skills required in developing your own startup. I also think that in a field like mine, which is really focused on innovation, and also in consulting roles, the experience of creating a startup gives you a fantastic understanding of business. And when I say business, what I mean is holistic business. So not just one aspect of business, but marketing, product development, service development, finances, HR. It means that as an entrepreneur, you have a really good understanding of the stresses and the pressures that businesses can be under, but it also gives you a great idea of what opportunities a business could chase and pursue. So yes, overall, I think there are a lot of outstanding qualities and experiences you develop by creating your own startup and being an entrepreneur when you're a student. The third question is, how do you determine whether a business idea is feasible? This is an amazing question, and the importance of idea validation cannot be understated here. So just like a science experiment, you need to develop your business hypothesis before you go and invest all of your time and money into your solution. And what I love to tell startups and entrepreneurs at this stage of their business is, do not fall in love with your product, do not fall in love with your service, instead fall in love with the problem. And this really is the first key step of validation. Is there a problem? What is the problem? Who does it affect? And then the second step of validation is focusing on potential solution and keeping a really open mind about what a solution could look like. So validation occurs through asking members of the community in person, through phone calls, through surveys, in online forums or Facebook groups. Use your imagination. The sky is really the limit here. And it can depend on the solution you're developing as to what area you're targeting to ask specific questions to. And the other key piece of advice here is remember not to just validate your solution, but also validate whether people are willing to pay for your solution. And if they are willing to pay, how much are they willing to pay for your solution? Finally, the other extremely important point to validate during this stage is, what are the competition and how does your community see the competition and where they sit in the market? I think that it's safe to say that if you can get 1,000 raving fans, you have a good business product or idea. The fourth question is, what tips do you have in regards to gaining traction on a business idea? This is a fantastic question because traction can be so challenging to get and maintain. The first thing I would say is that don't hold your cards close to your chest. Tell as many people as possible about your solution. Of course, this needs to be accompanied by an amazing branding and online marketing strategy. But at the end of the day, you are the most enthusiastic and passionate about your business and the best promoter of your solution. So you never know when you might meet someone who can help you, provide you advice, or further promote your brand. The second thing is participating in courses and accelerator programs. I think accelerator programs are an amazing opportunity to meet people with a wide range of talents and to form relationships with people who are also developing their own business and will also promote your business like you will promote theirs. Third, events with people who are experienced in business. This cannot be understated as an amazing opportunity, not just to get validation of your business solution, but to also promote your business solution and to get advice from people with extensive experience in the business community. And one that might be overlooked is innovation incentives. Now, this is an area that I work in, and one key obstacle to gaining traction can also be money to invest in marketing or solution development. So it's important to look at a range of government incentives that exist to help businesses develop their own solutions. So one is the R&D tax incentive, which can help you offset key R&D development costs. The other is the export market development grant that can help offset key marketing costs to market your solution overseas, as well as a range of direct government grants from both the federal government, state governments, and local governments. It's also really important here that you take time to consider your intellectual property position. So is there anything that you need to trademark or protect with a patent or keep as a trade secret? What does the competition have? Could you be infringing on someone else's trademarks? They're all really important questions to consider before you go out on your commercialization journey.
Thanks, Amy. It is really reassuring to know how transferable entrepreneurial skills are to the workplace and how highly they are valued as well. Next up, we have a representative from the Generator who will talk to us about how they support student startups and how we can also make our ideas become a reality.
Hey, MASA TV. My name is Jala Alex, and I am the community manager at the Generator. Thank you so much for having us for this episode. We're going to be talking a bit about entrepreneurship at Monash University today. So you may or may not have heard about the Generator before. Basically, we are the entrepreneurship hub at Monash University, and you might tell that I am on a virtual background today. So this is actually the co-working space that we have on campus at Clayton, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. So at the Generator, we work with people who may not even have a business idea, but have an inkling that they might be into entrepreneurship, all the way out to people who are spinning out companies from research from the labs at Monash. So a really, really, really broad spectrum of individuals that are working on businesses or entrepreneurial projects, companies. It's really, really cool stuff. So the way that we do that is through our programs and through events and workshops. So we run a range of programs throughout the year. Our first one is called the Validator. So that's our earliest stage program. Basically, it's a 5-week program, one session a week, and we get you from an idea to launch in that 5 weeks with a really, really strong focus on customer discovery. So really finding out if there is a need and want for the problem that you're trying to solve for. So that's the Validator program. We also have a program called the Startup Sprint, which is the first time we've run it was this year, actually. So it's a new program, but it's basically like a pre-accelerator program. So again, it's 5 weeks, but it's a little bit later stage. So you have validated your idea. You've done 100 customer interviews. They're saying that this is the need that they have. And maybe you've got an MVP that you're wanting to test. So in those 5 weeks, we will kind of push you on those pieces that will get you to the next stage. And then the program after that is our flagship program, which is called the Accelerator. So historically, this has been a 12-week program. This year, it was an 8-week program so that we could fit in the Startup Sprint. This year we accepted 10 teams, and each of those teams gets $10,000 equity-free seed funding. So we don't make profit of your successes. We are literally just there to help support you and guide you. So we really like supporting social enterprises or not-for-profits. and a whole gamut of startups. We've got some really, really exciting startups this year, and we are actually halfway through the Accelerator right now. So it's really peak season for us, and we're in the trenches with the startups, working really hard on getting them to the next stage. So that's very exciting. We also ran a program this year for PhD students. So that was called Researcher to Innovator, and that was a 3-week kind of boot camp style workshop sessions. So if you're a researcher, or you will be, that's a really, really great program for you as well, which will likely run next year as well. The other way that you can engage with us is through events and workshops. Usually we would be doing these face-to-face in our space, but we've gone digital. So we did a few webinars this year. You can actually find them on our YouTube channel, which is just Monash Generator, and go back and rewatch some of those. And we also do that through offering office hours. So you can book a one-on-one session with one of the Generator team to talk about your project or your business, and we can kind of, you know, diagnose it and see what your next steps might look like. So it's really great to have us just as a pair of ears to talk about your problems, and we can try and help solve for them. So that's really great too. I thought it might be a good idea as well to show you what the co-working space actually looks like. So I'm just going to share my screen. And here it is. Okay, so this space was actually purpose built for us at the end of last year, and was meant to open up in early May, but lockdown has prevented us from going in, so we can't wait for it to open. So this is the entrance, and right next door is the makerspace, which is really great. That's where a lot of products will be built, and we hope to turn a few of those products into businesses. To the right, here's where our staff will be. We've got some meeting rooms in the space which you can book out. And as we pan over to the left, this is kind of the more open co-working space. So these are hot desks, so you can come and work on your project and meet other like-minded people. This space through here is where our events will take place. So we've got a big screen, lots of tech to help us live stream and record. But basically, yeah, that's where all of our events and workshops will take place. This again is some more hot desking and co-working right through to the kitchen. And there's also another small meeting room that you can book out there. We've also got a presentation room, which is pretty cool. We'll probably be conducting a lot of workshops and events from this space too. So again, very excited, can't wait for it to open. Through here is where our more permanent startups will be working from. So they might have gone through the Accelerator in years past, or are in this year's cohort, but that's where they're located. And now we're just right at the front again. So yeah, can't wait for it to open, and invite you to come hang out and share your entrepreneurial spirit with the other like-minded people at Monash. Feel free to follow us on social media. That's just Monash Generator on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. In the meantime, if you want to talk to us about your business, you can book an office hours. So just head over to monash.edu/entrepreneurship, and there's a tab under advice where you can book in a meeting with us. So I'd love to hear what you're working on, love to help you and engage you with the community. So do reach out, and hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. It was really great to hear about all the support and resources that student entrepreneurs have at Monash. To wrap up the night, we'd like to say a huge thank you to our special guests for joining us for tonight's episode. We hope you all leave inspired and equipped with the knowledge to pursue your own entrepreneurial journeys. As always, don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow our Instagram and our LinkedIn. We're keen to see you guys at our next collab event with RMIT and the UMaLS ASA on how to tackle assessment centres. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good night.